Canada has accused Indian government of killing Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was a most wanted pro-Khalistan terrorist. But not just that. They've also expelled an intelligence chief in Ottawa after accusing the Indian government of involvement in the killing of the terrorist last June. Now, the diplomatic move has sent relationship between Ottawa and New Delhi already sour to a dramatic new low. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told an emergency session of the parliamentary opposition that his government had credible allegations linking Indian agents to the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He called in the strongest terms possible on the Indian government to cooperate in clearing up the matter. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has said Trudeau government had to take immediate action, saying Canada will not tolerate foreign interference and will protect its citizens in its times. Nijjar, remember, India had declared him a most wanted terrorist. This man was actually, we were told at that point, was an inter-gang rivalry in which he was gunned down right in front of a Gurdwara on June 18th in Surrey, which is a suburb of Vancouver that is home to major members of the Sikh community. He was accused of carrying out terrorist attacks in India.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
We've been clear we will not tolerate any form of foreign interference. We will protect Canada's sovereignty. I've conveyed these principles to my Indian counterparts, and I've also told him that we expect India's full collaboration to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
I can see perhaps two things happening. One is, in diplomacy, generally there's a tit for tat. So India would also, I think, in the next 24, 48 hours, probably expel some Canadian diplomat on some reason. Which we would have as a valid reason of ours. That's one which perhaps could happen in the next coming days, absolutely. And then secondly, I think probably our relations are, definitely negatively impacted hugely. And for the remaining part of it, the only thing which could bring an upside or, bring things back to some normal would be when a new government comes in Canada, and if it's not Trudeau, right? I don't know exactly how many years remain for his present term. So for the remaining term of Trudeau, we can expect our elections to be icy. And in the elections which are there in Canada, maybe in a year or two, I don't know exactly when.
Okay.
And if someone else than Trudeau comes. If Trudeau comes, then again, it will continue to be icy. But if some other leader is elected, then we can expect some repair in our relations.
This is the big story coming in right now. What happens to India-Canada relations here on? Sacking a senior Indian diplomat on accusations. Remember, no evidence has been provided by Canada, but accuses India that it could be involved in the killing of a pro-Khalistani separatist leader. I'm joined by some special guests right now in the panel. Let's go across to them. Shinder Porwal, a political science professor at the Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Vancouver. Also, former diplomat Deepak Vora is joining me in this live telecast. Also, Anil Trigunyat, former diplomat, over their expertise on what happens here on. Let's go across first to Canada because, Shinder Porwal, what do you think? This is such a big step that Canada has taken, sacking a diplomat on allegations on belief.
I think it was shocking news to all of us that the Prime Minister of this nation, not just an ordinary person.
Correct.
We would say that they have a credible evidence. If you have credible evidence, the killing is still at investigation stage. You should give it to the police, and that will help them to bring the case to the court. And that kind of evidence can be used. It's only the judgment of the judge. Judiciary will make sure who's the guilty and who's not guilty. This is quite a surprising act of our Prime Minister.
That's a very important point that you're making. It's come as a shocker, and it will, remains to be seen what India will respond on that. Let's go across. I request you to please stay on with me, sir. Let's go across to Deepak Vora, former diplomat, joining me. Mr. Vora, what should one make of this? Because we are waiting a reaction from India, but as you have also been a part of diplomacy, you've been a part of how two countries have their relationship. Even if there were allegations, it could have been conveyed through appropriate channels. Sacking a diplomat, threatening to snap ties, this is clearly perhaps, rather than take action against Khalistani extremists, taking action against India.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to be with you on your channel, to listen to you, to learn from you and from your other colleagues who are on the panel. I've just returned from the United States. You can see it's fall, and I went to Guruvayur in Kerala, hence my hair has been surrendered to the Lord. Ma'am, Canada is a funny country, and this just out fellow is forgive me, he's a buffoon, this character. I know him, I've met him. Absolutely empty in the brain. Now, what really happened was, ma'am, that Canada, let me go back a little bit in history for all those who are present here.
Yes.
You've heard of the group of 7 rich nations. The first meeting at the summit level was held in France. I was posted there in 1975. Canada was not invited. Then this fellow's father, Pierre Trudeau, begged and cried and sobbed. And finally, the Americans said, look, we need someone to carry our briefcase. Why don't you let my chamcha in? So then Canada was included, although they have no right to be there. That's the first thing. It's a big country in search of relevance. Nobody cares about Canada. You know what happened to him in Delhi. Prime Minister gave him a proper briefing on Khalistani activities in Canada with evidence. And then this guy, seeing that he was cornered, decided to retaliate. He canceled the trade mission that was supposed to come here to discuss free trade. It doesn't hurt us, it hurts Canada. He is a prime example, ma'am. One of my teachers in America was a lady called Barbara Tuchman. She's written this seminal book in 1984 called The March of Folly, How Governments Act Against Their Own Interests. He would be the latest chapter, totally against Canada's interests. He doesn't have a friend. I'm special advisor. 3 countries in Africa, they don't like Canada at all because Canada has nothing to offer except for its arrogance. So this is the first thing. Declaring a senior diplomat, I don't know if they're threatened to interrupt diplomatic relations. I just heard you mention that.
Yes.
I was not aware of it. But if there is a question of expelling one of our senior officers, this is called declaring him persona non grata, an undesirable person, unwelcome person, indulging in activities not commensurate with his diplomatic status. I've been through this myself in my own case. But what happens is then we will take reciprocal action, we'll retaliate, and we'll probably ask some Canadians.
That's right. So we're waiting for a reaction on that. I appreciate your comment. Just stay on with Bisa because former diplomat Arnold Trigonia was also joining me. Diplomat, you tell me, because when we talk of 2 nations here, and India has been for years now expressing concern about anti-India activities, about Khalistan activities on Canadian soil, expecting some action. Instead, the action that Canada takes is why its Prime Minister announcing credible allegations and sack the diplomat? What happens here on this?
Pooja, as you are aware, that Canada, unfortunately, has become the harbor of terrorists and extremists for a very long time now.
Yes.
And India has all the time raised these issues since the days of Kanishka, where I lost some of my friends also in that crash. And I know that this has been, and the way they have lagged on with this, they have done nothing about it, just catered to and pandered to the local constituency of Sikhs. And just not caring about India's interest all along. His father didn't allow this Balwinder Parmar, that fellow we wanted. He refused to extradite on a very funny excuse. And then when Justin Trudeau last time came to India, we provided him all the hospitality, and he brings the extremist Sikhs along with him in his delegation. And the kind of behavior and I fully agree with Ambassador Deepak Vora on this, that what kind of a leader he is. And this time also, Prime Minister made it a very clear, in the strongest possible terms. You see, the Khalistanis there are marking our ambassador, High Commissioner there, and the senior diplomats, saying that they kill. I mean, he should be the one who should be killing these terrorists himself and taking action against it, being a responsible country. But it has clearly shown, and there are reports, we have them, and everybody knows about it, that the Canadian Sikh extremists who are operating under the patronage of the government there are having direct connection with the Pakistani ISI and others. So they are trying to create problems in India. He allows these kind of Sikh referendum under the name of fake democracy or whatever it is they call it. I mean, but I think that this is going to hurt them. You know, when in India we used to have this very famous story of Bhasmasur. and they are going to suffer from this terrorism themselves, like Pakistan is doing now.
I can only imagine the boost that the Khalistan extremists must be getting right now when the Prime Minister, rather than crack down on those activities, actually calls India as the one behind the killing and decides to even sack one of the senior diplomats on bizarre charges. Gentlemen, I request you to please stay on with me because we have the first reaction coming in. From India, India has rejected allegations by Canada and calling the accusations absurd and motivated. That's the big breaking news that we are getting on our screens right now. India has said, and I quote the statement here, have strong commitment to rule of law. It's a bid to shift focus from Khalistanis. Charges are being rejected and have already been rejected at the Trudeau-Modi meeting. Remember, there was a pull-aside meeting. There was no bilateral meeting at the G20 between India and Canada, but there was a pull-aside meeting in which the Canadian concerns, Khalistani concerns on Canadian soil were expressed by India. Charges made by Canada were immediately rejected at that meeting, and now India has said these are absurd accusations. These are motivated. I want to go across to back to our guests again on this, and I want to take this to Shrinder Porwal, who's also a professor at the University in Vancouver. There are so many students, so many citizens from India, or those who have taken up Canadian citizenship from Indian origin, continue to live there. This was supposed to be a friendly nation. We expected Canada to take any action against any sort of anti-India activities, but this is just looking complete opposite of that. And do you think this is political pressure? This is coalition pressure, this is vote bank pressure on Canadian Prime Minister that rather than take action against those activities, they're accusing India of it. And could this impact the sort of lives that Indian students are living in Canada?
Well, it certainly does it to the Indian community, Indian international students. We rely on Indian missions for Consulate General, High Commission, for consular services, for visas, passports, and all those things. They provide us with those services. So any breakdown in diplomatic relations is actually going to hurt us, the Indian community here. It's not hurting them. And, secondly, you look at US and Canada, there's a tale of two different countries. US is now the closest ally of India, India, and Canada is starting a new Cold War.
That's a very important point you made, that USA perhaps is realizing where it needs to stand on the global order, and only Trudeau knows why and what would lead him to make that statement. Diplomat Deepak Vora, India has reacted, rubbished all these allegations. Are you expecting any counter-reaction or counteraction that India could take? Because there were supposed to be two mature nations. Even if there were concerns, Canada, like India had expressed to Canada, Canada could have expressed to India rather than take these immediate steps. Do you think, Diplomat Vora, that for the snubbing that Justin Trudeau got at the G20 summit, how else would he react on his soil rather than this?
Oh, there's an expression in Hindi, ulta chor kotwal ko dante. This is what we are seeing. But this guy was told, with evidence, ma'am, we don't do things when we talk to the Prime Minister level, we have evidence. We said, buddy, this you are up to. And if some Khalistani terrorist, deemed terrorist, designated terrorist, has been eliminated, well, he has. But you should do much more to curtail their activities. Now, these guys were terrified of the reaction when this fellow was eliminated. There was a lot of hoo-ha-ha in Canada. Look, the government wasn't able to protect this fellow. I say, I didn't know it's your job to protect terrorists. They got very upset that India's strong arms can reach out. I'm not saying that we were involved, but this was the general perception at that time that India may have been involved. Ma'am, just out, sorry, his name is Justin or just out? All right, just out. This fellow, he looks constipated first all the time. I'm being very blunt with you, even though it's somewhat undiplomatic. Second, I believe his wife has just walked out on him. So he's basically a very unhappy man. And then when India says, look, if you don't behave as far as the Khalistanis are concerned, we will then have to do what we have to do. And then he decides to go on the offensive. This is not done in 2023 amongst nations of the stature of India and Canada. Canada has a $1.5 trillion economy. I'm 4 trillion, heading to 5 trillion. I have a large market. He has nothing that he can offer me apart from the Indian community that goes there, our students. And if our students don't go there to study, many of the universities will shut down. Let me just say one thing, ma'am, with my experience in the United States. You know, in 1984, I was posted there when Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated, Operation Blue Star, and the Americans, there were Khalistanis protesting outside our embassy. The Americans said, look, guys, this is your problem, sort it out. Then comes 1998. We were treated as some kind of riffraff. 1998, we carry out a nuclear test despite technology denial by the Americans. I was there, and the Americans turned out and said, listen, guys, I don't think we can mess around with you because you've done it. We've delayed it by 10 years, but you've achieved it. Then the relationship came on the upswing when the respect for India came. Canada still has to get that respect. Don't send your trade delegation. Happy birthday. I don't want them. Nobody wants it. I go to Africa, I'm special advisor in 3 countries. They don't care about Canada. And I say, look, as Canadians say, the Canadian who? Who's the prime minister? Never heard of the character. So I think these guys as a large country should come to terms that they do not carry any clout.
And we hope that the Canadian citizens are watching what their Prime Minister is up to. Rather than take action against extremist elements, they're actually blaming India, taking action against Indian diplomats. Diplomat Anil Triguniyad, what do you think happens here on between 2 countries while the global order is also changing? We've seen Brampton parades. We have seen the manner in which Canadian soil has allowed a referendum. When G20 was happening here, there was this bizarre referendum by Khalistanis taking place. They are definitely getting a boost by these actions. They call it foreign interference by India. Now, clearly, India has expressed concerns. Canada has faced Kanishka bombing by themselves. Their own citizens also suffered. And amid all of this, this new Prime Minister, young Prime Minister says, India is to be blamed and I'll sack their diplomat. What happens here on between 2 nations? How do you think that India could possibly proceed?
Well, frankly, Pooja, I believe that he has lost it. Frankly, for whatever reasons, the kind of actions he's taking, despite he's not able to, probably he's too much, in my view, driven by his domestic compulsions. That may be one of the reasons that he has behaved the way he is. In any case, the bilateral relations have seen, they have been at their lowest at the moment, and we have seen the way he has behaved, and Prime Minister has very clearly conveyed to him that what we expect. And therefore now, as per diplomacy, is reciprocity. So if they are going to expel an Indian diplomat, obviously there will be repercussions from in India. And I would personally feel that now it is the time that we need to scale down our relationship with Canada. Because we are getting nothing out of it except getting hurt. I mean, that means that they are allowing and enabling these Sikh extremists to operate against India. And we have seen that in India also the Khalistani movement, which is an exported element and has thrived in the last, once again. And so therefore we need to be careful about
Diplomat
it.
Triguniyad, I must tell you that Diplomat Vora was literally applauding when you said that we need to scale down on the trade ties. It appears that your voice may be echoed in different diplomatic quarters as well. I request you gentlemen to please stay on. I want to bring in our Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan on this. Geeta, India has reacted. Do tell us about India's statement and what happens here on.
Well, that's the news that's coming in. India has rejected the allegations, calling them allegations absurd and motivated, also likening it to the kind of instances and incidents that are taking place well within Canada. The Indian administration has said that that political figures have openly expressed sympathy for such elements, and that certainly remains a concern, but also has said that space of Canada has been used for a range of illegal activities, including murders, human trafficking, and organized crime, which is really not new. Rejecting attempts to connect government of India to any such developments, the Indian government has urged the Canadian administration to take prompt and effective legal action against all anti-India elements. So they're going back to the conversation that this is a major concern for India, the Khalistanis living in Canada. Having said that, they've also rejected allegations of involvement in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Very interesting. We'll go through that big breaking news that's come again, which is India rejecting the accusations, the allegations that Canada has made against India, and has in very categorical terms has said that this cannot be accepted, and the manner in which that these are absolutely bizarre and motivated comments that have been made by Canada. Also, India has stated, and I reiterate it here in this big news coming in, that charges have been were rejected even at the Modi Trudeau meeting, and it's a strong commitment that India has always had to the rule of law. So that's the big news that's coming in, and we'll continue to keep our focus on this big story. Remember, India has also maintained that Canada is the one giving space to these Khalistani criminals, Khalistani extremists, and India was always expressing concerns over that. I want to quickly take a final question from one of the professors, because it's also as much about how the Indian community will react there. Professor Porwal, at this point, what is the Indian community feeling like? Those who've been living in Canada for years, those who may have shifted just about a short while ago, when you express or expect action against extremist elements, instead, this is how the Prime Minister of a country reacts. What is the concern? Because there have been in the past, we've seen skirmishes, scuffles, temples being defecated. We've been seeing a lot of protests that are happening against India. Indira Gandhi's assassins have been literally shown as martyrs. What is the feeling among the Indian expats and the community there, sir?
Well, first of all, the Indian community is still upset that one of the largest terrorist acts on Canadian soil was Air India bombing. In which 329 Canadians, mostly of Indian origin, died. And there are so many violent acts of these Khalistanis. And our Prime Minister's popularity is sinking faster than Titanic. His own party is reliant upon Jagmeet Singh's NDP. So it's an almost coalition partnership. His own popularity is going down. If we have any kind of diplomatic problems with India, Indian communities, again, I'm going to say, is the big loser, because we rely on Indian missions for our consular services.
And I'm told that this is a very senior diplomat who has been just sacked. This is, remember, sacking of a diplomat. It's not that a diplomat has been summoned for an interaction or for at least a conversation, for at least expressing a concern. And a diplomat to be sacked by a country is a huge, huge diplomatic step that has been taken. And I want to go across to diplomat Anil Trigunayat for that. When such an action is taken, and it may have its repercussion, but today, this new India is not someone to go on the defensive. It is very likely to take an assertive, possibly an aggressive stand as well. Do you see the relations between the two countries suffering? And I say that because at this point, Trudeau has made it very clear. Justin Trudeau has said, we will not listen to your concerns, even if they may be right, even if they are very clear in what you, as India, has also suffered. We will do what we think is correct. And one can imagine the boost that Khalistan extremists must be getting, and we'll soon run a profile of Hardeep Singh Nijjar as well. To be standing up for a most wanted terrorist like that speaks only of the Prime Minister and the government and of Canada, isn't it, Diplomat Trigunayat?
Well, absolutely. I think that Trudeau is willing to stake his country's reputation for his political gains and siding with these kind of extremists. In India, in Canada, as you know, there are very large number of Sikh community and the other Indian community, which is their very proud heritage. They always hold India in high regard. They are treated with great respect. It's only a minuscule number of these Sikh extremists that are operating and are allowed to operate. And unfortunately, they are able to have a run with the government there. So they are being enabled by the Canadian governments. Now, what I feel is that this expulsion of the diplomat, which is their foreign minister also mentioned that she spoke to our foreign minister and has conveyed it.
All right, Diplomat Trigunayat, I'll just get back to you. There it seems to be an audio issue, but I appreciate you gentlemen for constantly being with us and giving us your perspective, because diplomats can help us understand. Professors joining from Canada can help us understand what exactly could be the repercussions and what is the community feeling like. I also want to bring in this live telecast our managing editor, Gaurav Sawant, on the latest on that. Gaurav, this is a huge reaction that has come in even from India. When India says that these are motivated charges, we are going to dismiss them, but we always believe in the rule of law. Was there, of course, there must be appropriate channels, Gaurav, to express concern if Canada had, but to sack a diplomat, to threaten to snap ties, to say these are credible allegations, to say in the House of Commons is making a political statement, isn't it?
You hit the nail on its head. It's Justin Trudeau's political statement for elections. His party is dependent on Jagmeet Singh's party to win elections. and that's exactly what he's doing. So when you have Khalistan supporters who actually end up being ministers in your government, who end up being very close to the ruling dispensation, and the fact that there is a long history to it, it's there for the world to see. Justin Trudeau literally lives in cuckoo land if he thinks that in today's day and age, in such an interconnected world, he can get away with this, especially with facts out in public domain. The fact that his government has not taken action against Khalistani terrorists, Khalistani sympathizers and Khalistani supporters, the fact that he had to be called out that a referendum with gun-wielding terrorist pictures was to be carried out in a school in Surrey goes on to show how the wokes are actually turning a blind eye to ground realities which will harm them in future. And India, in writing, has raised this with Canada, especially narco-terrorism, human trafficking, the elements that Justin Trudeau and his government support have been involved in this. They've paid a price for it. Nijjar's killing has been it's a gang rivalry, according to what sources had told India Today when Nijjar was killed in June. It just goes on to indicate that there is a massive cover-up in the run-up to elections. And like you and I had discussed, there is a long history to it. Pierre Trudeau had not taken action against the terrorist, Talvinder Parmar.
Okay, that's Gaurav Sawant speaking. Gaurav, if you can still hear me, I can understand if he was speaking to about a generic citizen of Canada or someone who had contributed a lot to Canadian society. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was not really born and brought up in Canada, moved to Canada to escape India's law in the 1990s, gets designated as a terrorist by India in 2020. He was the chief of the Khalistan Tiger Force, was clearly vocal, active when it came to anti-India activities of making a separate Khalistan state. There was nothing so appropriate about this individual that that Prime Minister of Canada would actually want to snap ties with India on that, Gaurav.
You're absolutely right. Hardeep Nijjar's entire background, the fact that he entered Canada illegally. He entered Canada illegally, was involved in separatist and terrorist activities even in Canada. This issue had repeatedly been raised at every level, whether it's the National Security Advisor, whether it's the Indian mission, whether it's the External Affairs Minister. It was repeatedly raised with Canada, and yet no action was taken. Canada was warned of activities of such elements and the detrimental effect on India. Secessionist movement in a democratic country which claims to be a friendly country, and yet Justin Trudeau's government took no action. And ultimately, this is escalating a situation so that, he wins elections in Canada. It just goes on to show desperate times ahead as far as Justin Trudeau government is concerned. And that's exactly why India continues to adopt an India first line on this. All facts will be out in public domain, which would be hugely embarrassing for Canada, given the long history of Canada's support to Khalistan terrorism.
Gaurav, before I let you go, so my final question would be, now that India has reacted, should we say this will end here, or is this just the beginning between India and Canada relationship?
In the run-up to elections in Canada, this will only escalate because Justin Trudeau has painted himself in a corner. Given the fact that he's painted himself in a corner, he will have to put out whatever evidence they claim to have out in public domain. And then it will be scrutinized legally, it will be scrutinized diplomatically, and all evidence. Again, like the long history of Canada's support to terror, all of that will be out in public domain, and in the end, Canada will not come out smelling of roses, and this would have a major impact on the relationship between the two countries. Again, it would depend on who comes back to power after elections in Canada.
Thank you so much, Gaurav Sawant, the managing editor, with the details and updating us about the information coming in. Thank you so much, Gaurav, for now. Deepak Vora, former diplomat, continues to be with us. Diplomat Vora, here are the facts. In 2018, former Punjab Chief Minister Captain Amrinder Singh handed over a list of most wanted individuals to Justin Trudeau, and it had Hardeep Singh Nijjar's name on the list. India constantly conveyed that this is someone who even Canada needs to be concerned about. He is a wanted terrorist. He has been accused of bomb blasts in Ludhiana in Punjab. He has been accused of serious anti-India activities, and instead today he has been killed in June in Vancouver in what is seen as an inter-gang rivalry, and Canada decides to literally in many ways snap ties with India, with Nijjar in the center of the controversy. That is what is, I think, more shocking than anything else.
You just heard what Ambassador Anil Jagannathan had to say. He's one of the best. He's one of the best in the world. That's why we're the best foreign service. Ma'am, let me put it to you like this. During my tenure in the service, I've had occasion once, very unpleasant conversation with the head of mission. We normally summon the High Commissioner or the Ambassador and say, buddy, kick out this guy. But we do it very quietly. We do it with maturity because we don't want to bring it in the public domain. But this man is an idiot. And he has done it publicly, so we'll retaliate publicly. Remember when he came to India some years ago, 3 years ago, on an official visit, he brought a few Khalistanis with him. Then he went out to Sabarmati, put on a khadi kurta and pajama and said, oh, I've conquered the hearts of India. Then he goes out to Punjab and starts doing the bhangra. The man is an ass. This is not how international relations are conducted. Finally, ma'am, Mr. Trudeau, I understand that you had COVID. There is now a lot of research on long COVID, which impacts your brain power. Get yourself examined. If you want, come to India, we'll examine you here. We'll repair your mind. But this is unacceptable, ma'am, and he's going to pay for this. I'm sorry about the Indian community, but Indian community is so widely respected in Canada that their reputation and their continuance and their happiness in Canada will outlive this unsavory episode, which has been initiated by Canada.
Professor Shinder Porwal, I'll come to you now because you're based in Vancouver. You also speak to a lot of, whether it's Indian teachers or students or those who are moving to Canada. And there are many, in fact, thousands, if not lakhs of Indians who are moving to Canada, who moved to Canada in the past few years and possibly see a future there. When they see the Khalistan extremists literally getting a sort of a boost with these statements by nobody else but the Prime Minister, what I want to understand is what happens here on in terms of, because I must add here, for you also, while you say Indian community is upset, we have been recently doing a lot of explainers on Khalistani extremists. One video that I did had Canadian citizens react who were not happy with Justin Trudeau's behavior, who actually had a lot of opposition to how he has been stating. So do you think there is a lot of, if not outrage, at least opposition to what Justin Trudeau has been doing or not doing lately in the past few years?
Well, you can say the silent majority of the Indians in Canada are really opposed to this extremist element.
Yes.
They're very tiny, very small proportion of the population, but they get quite a publicity because a person like Trudeau is giving them publicity. Now, if you look at the context of Trudeau's statement, today was the first day of opening of Canadian Parliament. He had no issue. His popularity is sinking. He's reliant on Jagmeet Singh's support. And he just created this issue out of nowhere. So you have to understand this. Next election, he's gone.
How is the opposition, or how are those who are not happy with Justin Trudeau? Are they reacting? Are they vocal? Or perhaps because he's in the government, he's the Prime Minister, perhaps those who may disagree also are comparatively quiet right now, do you think, Professor?
I think the issue becomes when a nation faces what they call foreign interference, then other people don't speak loudly. Because now Justin Trudeau is trying to wrap himself with the Canadian flag because he has no other issue.
You made an important point that he used the word, or actually the foreign minister there used the word foreign interference, and that is making it into a completely different issue. Diplomat Anil Jagannathan, my question to you here would be that when you use the word foreign interference, it's definitely a very serious word, and you're alleging that India is doing it. How does one look at that? Because when I was going through the records of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and just to reiterate for the viewers as well, that this is not about a citizen who's gone and contributed to Canadian society. He's only indulged in anti-India activities, something that may harm even Canada in the long run if the Khalistan extremists get that boost. In 2010, Punjab police had filed a case against him, had asked for his extradition as well. UK-based Paramjit Singh Pamma, other wanted terrorists, all of that is what India was constantly wanting to take action against, while other countries still appear to have taken this seriously. Canada appears to have given them completely free run. Diplomat Anil Jagannathan, do you think that Justin Trudeau should listen to the Sikh community? There are many members of the Sikh community who have risen and spoken against Khalistan extremism, how that gives a terrible name to the Sikhi, rather than listen to these anti-India individuals.
Well, that is if the sanity prevails on him, he'll listen to them. But it doesn't seem so at the moment, because what happens is the bogey of foreign interference is raised by most countries when there are elections, and it happens. And this was a convenient thing because Prime Minister had cornered him with all the proof and evidences to the contrary what he was talking about. And therefore, instead of taking any action against that, he wants to salvage his popularity and last-ditch effort to somehow win the election or be part of the ongoing coalition or whatever happens. But this is an easy way out, but that is a very dangerous way out, because if you cannot prove it, that's going to recoil on you. And that's something. But let me just, Professor has been mentioning about the concerns of the Indian community. Let me just assure him that irrespective of the way the diplomatic relations continue, India continues to remain committed to the welfare of all the Indians who have goodwill for India, whether they're Indian citizens or PIOs. We have stood by them, will continue to stood by them, and we are very proud of them. So Indian Embassy will continue to function whichever way it is to provide the services to them. They will not be affected or impacted. That's what I want to assure you, that this is how my experience shows.
Gentlemen, stay on with me. For the viewer joining in right now, where did this issue really erupt from? From the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. This is what he said in the House of Commons. This is a Canadian Parliament. This is what the Prime Minister has said. Listen in.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
We've been clear, we will not tolerate any form of foreign interference. We will protect Canada's sovereignty. I've conveyed these principles to my Indian counterparts, and I've also told him that we expect India's full collaboration to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
Credible allegations is the word. No evidence has been provided yet. This is a mere mention, and all of this standing for a terrorist. The National Investigation Agency had put an award of 10 lakh rupees on Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and that with regard to whether it was training for Khalistan extremist activities, for anti-India activities, for conspiring to kill Hindu leaders in India. So this is the terrorist who was killed in Surrey by unidentified killers, which was seen as an inter-gang rivalry outside a Gurudwara in Surrey. For this, the Canadian Prime Minister is willing to cause friction and snapping ties with India, sacking its diplomat. Remember, sacking a diplomat, and diplomat Deepak Vora can tell us more about it, that when as a country you sack a diplomat, what message are you really conveying about a country against a country? Tell us about that, because this is definitely a serious step. This is not a summon. It's the sacking. It's telling a diplomat, go back to the country.
If it's done publicly, it's very serious. We are very mature, and I've done this myself. Ma'am summoned the head of mission of whichever country and told him, listen, we don't like this character, send him away. And they do it, because that doesn't damage the bilateral relationship in the public perception. The fact that this guy has decided to go public, and that too in his parliament, means he's said it at the highest level without any evidence. Now he'll be under pressure to produce the evidence, so he'll manufacture the evidence. This character is not even a native-born Canadian. For God's sake, he's a chap who's wanted in one country. He's been up to all kinds of nonsense, and then you talk about improving your relationship with India. Ma'am, he got a dressing down by the Chinese fellow, ding-ling, ting-pong, ping-pong, at the Bali summit, where the Chinese told him, you know how to behave. And this fellow looked like a schoolboy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He just doesn't learn. I mean, I really don't understand. We would never do it. We do it very quietly. We do it with grace and dignity. Obviously, grace and dignity are terms that Mr. Justin Trudeau doesn't understand. And then his foreign minister saying, I raised this with her Indian counterpart, and so we are expelling this person. You're declaring him persona non grata. In legal terms, it means that we don't want this chap over here. We don't recognize his diplomatic status, so let him go away. Fair enough. He will leave. But the impact of this on bilateral relations is going to continue for a very long time. And Mr. Trudeau is singularly, solely responsible.
And more than India, Canada, I fear for how Canada is going to emerge in the next few years, and specifically in the Indian community that had so much hope from Canadian leadership. But now it looks like that there are some concerns, and perhaps the next few years Canada will have to pay the price of how the inaction of the incumbent government is being seen. I appreciate all you gentlemen for joining us. Professor Shindar Porwal, Ambassador and Diplomat Deepak Vora, and Diplomat Anil Trigunyat for giving us your views and perspective. Thank you very much.